Trying to find meaning in life is as natural a human obsession as concluding that it's all meaningless. Humans torn between these feelings of finding signs in subtle ways, making us feel more important as if we're somehow connected to the universe around us, and at the same time dismissing it all as random, the world purely materialistic, and our lives ultimately disposable. Like a pinball going back and forth in the bumpers of an overactive pinball player on the brink of tilt. We're polarized in this way. And for the most part, people self identify with one or the other camp. There are those folks who look for those signs, who believe in God, who might go to church, synagogue, or mosque. And they tacitly accept this transcendent being, omnipotent and omnipresent, controlling every aspect of our lives, and yet somehow setting us loose for us to discover for ourselves what that meaning is all about, and creating some sort of purpose through identifying with this entity and somehow following the path it might have set forth for us. And in the other camp, you have folks who dismiss all of that as hocus pocus nonsense. And we're here because we're here. Science does a good enough job explaining most of it, and what we don't know we'll eventually find out. It's really up to us, and we create our own values. And the golden rule is a good idea just so we don't all kill each other. Now, somewhere in between might lurk a better and more comprehensive view of the universe and ourselves. I tend to be more scientific, look at the world in a ostensibly materialistic kind of way, in the sense that there's matter and energy as we've come to describe them and measure them. We've evolved more or less along Darwinian, naturally selective lines. And here we are, yet, based on the evidence of our own senses, compounded by the latest philosophies and ideas behind science itself, consciousness, our perception of the universe, is intricately connected to the universe. And the whole notion of purely objective reality is as false as the belief that there's a purely subjective one. So I'd like to talk a little bit about this fine line between reason and what some folks would call unreason, knowledge and air quote superstition, based on my own experience of the universe and myself. Hello and welcome to another pod of Bald and Bloviating. I'm going to be bloviating about this fascinating subject, what I'm calling the psychic multiverse. Ooh. And for the first part, I'm going to focus on how premonitions and other unexplained phenomena can be described as intersecting worlds. And whether or not you call bullshit on the multiverse, by worlds, I mean each human and their relationship to other humans and the world. Let me dive in. My mother experienced premonitions of major events and would share them with our skeptical family, only to have her visions confirmed time and time again. Vivid examples of this abound, including when she woke us up in the middle of the night to reveal that my sister, who lived in a different continent, was going to have a baby soon. And sure enough, my nephew Juan was born about an hour after my mother shared her odd visions with us. My father was exposed to similarly inexplicable phenomena, most notably toward the end of World War II, when he was a teenager in Budapest, Hungary. Arrested by the Gestapo, he was thrown into an armored van with half a dozen men and a lone woman. She claimed to be psychic, busted for telling a bad fortune to an even worse Nazi. The prisoners laughed and dared her to predict their fates. So she pointed to each of them in turn, describing their imminent future. "Count these minutes, this being your last day," she said to one. "I'm sorry to say you will be beaten to death this very night." The prisoners listened with even more laughter, but also with terror. Finally, she got to my father. "And you are the one and only lucky one here. At this same time tomorrow, in this same van, you will be headed back down the mountain in the opposite direction." They thought she was crazy, nonetheless freaked out by her dire predictions on their way up that mountain. And sure enough, the next day, at that same time, in that same van, my father was headed back down to where he was arrested, living to tell me the tale 40 years later. He never heard about the fates of the rest, but assumed that if his fortune turned out to be true, well then. I also feel premonitions that manifest, befuddling and intriguing my science-obsessed mind. Less like my mother's harbinger of good news and more akin to warnings as experienced by my father, my own intuition has alerted me to various dangers. In no such instance was I able to act on or influence the outcome. I was simply given a courteous, if foreboding, heads up. Reminiscent of the Twilight Zone episode Purple Testament, where a U.S. lieutenant at war is able to see who will be next to die from a scintillating shimmer on that person's face shortly before, I somehow sense the last time I see someone alive. Not always, but often enough to further alarm and intrigue me, make me seriously question what the hell is going on. I was 12 or so, visiting my ailing grandmother in the hospital. Diagnosed with bone cancer, in her 70s and a lifelong smoker, she stubbornly held on with the same tenacity she brought to driving the rest of the family nuts. Far from finished yet, at least not in any visible way, she shouted at a nurse when I sensed, almost imperceptibly, her end. She is going to die, I thought, or more accurately felt. Sure enough, she died that very night. That same feeling has recurred several times across the country and through the decades, with no more than a few days from me experiencing that unsettling, creepy, yet transcendent feeling to the about to be deceased actually dying. He is going to die, I would feel. They are going to die, I would feel, as they die and I shiver. Recently, my teenage son was about to go out, and I felt a compulsion to warn him. "Be careful out there," I suggested for the first time and for no special reason. My kid growing up in New York City, Manhattan, and commuting on his own since he was 11 years old. I always worry a little, a healthy concern from a father for his son. But I sensed that night was different, and I couldn't tell why. I dismissed my concern after he left and didn't think about it until about 1 in the morning when insomnia struck me out of the blue. Born with flat feet, bad eyes, and ADHD, I'm otherwise fit with a cast iron stomach and no trouble sleeping. Unless ODing on habaneros or experiencing a breakup or working late into the night on some writing project. But late that evening, something wasn't right. Tossing and turning, I hit the light and checked my phone. The opposite of a helicopter parent, I nonetheless have a tracking app installed on our family phones depicting a dynamic map of New York City and its boroughs, floating avatars depicting both my kids' locations in real time. I don't do it to spy, I do it in case of instances exactly like this one, when my gut tells me something's wrong. Nikki, my 17-year-old, was in Central Park and in motion. Our GPS capabilities these days are astonishing. Tech the U.S. military didn't have until shortly before we did. The data in and of itself didn't alarm me, as we live on the Upper West Side, and he's got a girlfriend on the Upper East. He typically traverses across Central Park, which is post-Giuliani fairly safe, even late at night. Assured he was fine enough to be trackable and in motion toward home, I turned off the light, put my phone away, and eventually fell asleep. My concern continued into my dreamscape, though, as within it he appeared gasping for air in our small kitchen. I kept opening the refrigerator in the dream, imploring him to drink water and eat something, and he kept scowling, slamming the door shut. The next morning, I woke with residual stress, soon relieved to knock on his bedroom door, open it, and find him in his bed, fast asleep. "Wake up," I shouted as usual, getting him up for school as part of our daily ritual. Always late, we didn't have much time to discuss the evening before, let alone squeeze in any meaningful breakfast. "I don't have time," he yelled on his way out the door. Life catching back up, I didn't think much about my premonition, insomnia, or his late night through Central Park in my dream until he brought it up after returning from school the next day. "You ever have a really close call?" he asked, seemingly out of nowhere while opening the refrigerator door. "Like, you look back at it and think that you were so close to maybe even dying." Confirming my fears, he was riding one of those rental city bikes along the main path in Central Park when a high-speed police patrol car roared from behind. I had my headphones on, listening to music really loud, and didn't hear him coming at all, said Nikki. "He was going really fast and just missed me as at the same exact time I weaved to the left. Afterwards, I realized he could have hit me so easily. I lucked out." Each day we make thousands of decisions, and each decision has an impact on our lives. A vast majority of our choices have little, if any, long-term consequences, while a few have the potential to completely transform our entire existence. Deciding between chocolate or vanilla ice cream will likely prove meaningless, yet selecting this career or that is certainly significant. Such major, momentous choices with obvious, significant repercussions fascinate me less then the unnoticed or forgotten actions that somehow reverberate into seismic, life-changing circumstances. Consider the near misses we encounter throughout each day, how all of us are literally a second or two from calamity and even death, from one moment to the next. Think about it. An activity as common and everyday as walking across the street is fraught with peril. A 1 or 2 second delay or rush might mean the difference between that otherwise unseen car narrowly missing you or killing you. My son's close call with that squad car could have, with even less of a space or time difference, put him into the hospital or the grave. The German film Run Lola Run is based on this idea of seconds transforming entire lives. The heroine hesitates, continues, or leaps when running into a tenant and his dog parked on their steps. Each reaction, in a sense, splitting the universe into 3 distinct timelines. Whether Lola is arrested, redeemed, or killed in the end results as a direct consequence of her actions on that stairway, with only a 1 or 2 second difference. Her entire destiny is laid out by sheer coincidence, decided at that one almost random branching point. The science and mathematics of chaos theory is based on the observation that small changes generate enormous consequences. Speculation regarding the multiverse assumes that every possibility actually plays itself out. These two concepts complement each other when we imagine our lives continuously branching within a broader reality of endless pathways. Although untested and perhaps untestable, speculation about the multiverse is enticing because it helps address otherwise vexing fundamental questions, such as, why is the universe the way it is? Simply answered, if an infinite number of universes actually exist, and everything that possible is actualized, then we just happen to be in one of those universes where we can and do exist. Speculating further, suppose that within an infinite number of these infinite universes, everything is identical up until that instant when my son did or did not die that night. Might my unconscious mind have somehow been tuned into these infinite parallel universes so that my premonition was somehow a bridge between boundaries, joined in that fateful moment? If true, then within infinite universes, my son was injured, in others sadly killed, while in still others, the police car took an entirely different route. This blog never written. This podcast never recorded. And if so, then maybe the engine of our intuition, the source of our creativity, are in these whispers across worlds, echoes throughout eternity. Meanwhile, here and now, I'm glad my son is okay. Michael Shermer, who is the champion celebrity bullshit debunker, relates an instance where I believe his fiance's father passed away just before their wedding. And the father had an old radio in the house or apartment that didn't work. It was broken. It was kept as a memento, an heirloom, a set piece. And just before the marriage or associated with the ceremony, they had gathered in the space and they suddenly heard music playing. And there were two songs playing. One was a celebratory one, appropriate for such a happy event as the marriage of these two people in love. And then it shifted as if a DJ were in charge to a classical piece that was the favorite of the deceased father. And then Michael relates, again, the ultimate skeptic. He's written a column for Scientific American. He's like Bill Nye the science guy, but more like a debunker, again, of bullshit theories, conspiracy theories, allegations of spiritual events and UFOs, and then demonstrating through raw evidence-based inquiry that these are false reports or random hallucinations. This guy relates how they realized that the music was indeed coming from that radio, that broken antique heirloom radio of his fiance's father. And when they came to realize this, the radio had already stopped working and seemed as inert as when he had originally found it. Somehow the radio had reactivated spontaneously to play music at their wedding party. And to this day, Mike just shrugs his shoulders and can't explain it. And the one theory that he's posited as to how it could have activated was more or less the one I just related here, with the multiverse and worlds and boundaries crisscrossing. You don't need God for a multiverse. And for that matter, you don't even need spirituality. So it's kind of a way out how you can have bizarre, inexplicable phenomena that certain folks might explain as a ghost or some parting of the veil between the living and the dead. And Michael explains this, or at least tries to describe it, as perhaps boundaries between universes crisscrossing. We all shrug our shoulders. What we don't know, we don't know, and it's all a matter of interpretation. But something is strange, not just some days, but almost every day. And as I began, we are always looking for signs. We are trying to figure out and connect the dots. Skeptics might say this is just a way of making our own otherwise meaningful lives more meaningful by connecting us to these hidden connections. But deep down inside, there's a feeling that I have felt and that others have felt of this otherworldly and interdimensional connection to some place, some things, some entities, definitely some feelings that are ancient, that are not of this world, and yet interlocked intimately with it. And there are these moments, much like Aldous Huxley wrote, where our doors of perception open and there is an intersection, and it's fleeting. It could last for a tenth of a second or 10 minutes, but it nonetheless does. And if perception and reality are enmeshed within and through this emergent phenomena that we call human consciousness, then it becomes very difficult to say what exactly, air quote, objective truth and objective reality really are. And if we go so far as to take ourselves that far through that door of perception, part the veil and reach across boldly enough, then maybe we also need to conclude, at least on some level, that human emotion is part of this too, intentionality. It goes beyond our mere perceptions, but our will, our desires, our fears, and our hopes. And somehow the emotional and intentional underpinning of consciousness itself has its own volition and its own impact, not only on our own feelings, but on things that we would ostensibly consider events and experiences and realities outside of ourselves. And with that, let me transition to an incident that was part of a larger short story of psychedelic use in high school. Some of my earliest experiences with psychedelic drugs go all the way back to my adolescence. This is a particularly vivid experience, and I believe it's connected to everything that I've just been bloviating about, because the one universal characteristic of psychedelic drugs is that parting of the veil, is the opening of the doors of perception induced through chemical ingestion that could be argued either way. You could conclude that, well, this is proof that this is completely a materialistic, physical, deterministic expression of the human brain. So you drink too much alcohol and you feel wheezy and your inhibitions are gone and you act like a fool and you pass out, or you eat some psilocybin mushrooms or drop some LSD, and the effects are similarly pharmacologically deterministic. And in this case, instead of acting like an idiot and falling down, you see angels and connect with spirits. But on the other hand, people who are admittedly a little bit more creative and air quote open minded might see these chemicals as a true gateway to things that are outside of ourselves, an objective dimensional reality that is existing contingent on our perception of it, but is nonetheless outside of ourselves to the point where, by ingesting these chemicals or getting into that state, we are able to make this connection with something real, equally real as the everyday objective world, equally real as our everyday perceptions, but somehow masked and behind the scenes, simply because we'd be overwhelmed if we would be inundated by the stimuli. How can we function? How could we survive as a species if, instead of hunting that animal or fleeing from that tiger, foraging for that food, we're busy tripping our balls off in the African savannah and are unable to populate the next generation? So anyway, with all that in mind, here's another little story that I've entitled Psychedelic Before Psychedelics Were Cool: How a High School Hallucination Continues to Entice and Enthrall My Life, filling me with passion and ideas that I'm eager to share now. Nixon's war on drugs was arguably one of the worst policy decisions in American history. I'm recording this at the end of April 2025. Trump's tariffs will likely supersede this, but I digress. Anyway, ostensibly designed to incarcerate black people, the destructive repercussions of Nixon's drug war were vast, including the elimination of entire, already demonstrated viable drug classes from research, development, and clinically tested and approved distribution. A racist president wasn't the only problem early on. Psychedelic scientist celebrities, epitomized by Timothy Leary, sowed as much insanity as they did insight, spreading confusion and mixed messages to an already terrified and misinformed public. As addiction and ignorance rage, non addictive drugs with the greatest untapped therapeutic value were shelved. The history of psychedelic science is expansive and complex, with a state change in legal, clinical, therapeutic, and commercial attitudes starting to happen about 2 decades ago. Since then, laws are changing, academic institutions are researching, key influencers are driving, drug companies are manufacturing, and doctors are actually prescribing these psychedelic drugs. As astonishing as legalized weed, FDA approved pharmaceutical ketamine, and likely soon MDA and others, despite some hiccups and speed bumps, seemed inconceivable back in the early 80s. As rambunctious high school juniors and seniors, my friends and I clandestinely ingested psilocybin mushrooms, LSD blotters, and various other illegal, societally denigrated, mind altering chemicals. We were indeed inspired by Aldous Huxley and Pink Floyd, and self identified as smartass counterculture renegades. The disapproval of our parents, peers, and teachers was positively reinforcing for us. Unlike morally questionable teen recreational activities such as bullying, shoplifting, vandalism, and similar hooliganism, our style of being bad boys felt karmically cool. Cascading off a horrific bout of sophomore depression, I embraced our recreational drug use and wild hallucinogenic shenanigans with gusto, feeling I had nothing to lose after nearly losing it all. My reckless abandon made me fearless, bold, and eager to indulge every trip. In retrospect, these adolescent psychedelic odysseys are some of my fondest memories. One such memorable evening was spent with my fellow day trippers, Fran and Ed, an amazing hallucination germinating at the Calvary Cemetery in Evanston, Illinois. Flush with the lake of aptly named Lakeshore Drive, or LSD, the spooky place was our go-to haunt. We'd often get wasted in the graveyard first, then dash over to the beach, usually patrolled by the cops. Fran parked in a side street, and we skunked to our preferred entry point where low-hanging bushes covered the wrought iron fence. More burnout than Jock, we still knew how to climb or at least lunge over the top without skewering ourselves on the pointy posts. Once inside, we had the resting place of more than 100,000 Catholic souls, all to ourselves. Prowling around the shadowy vaults, monuments, and mausoleums was enticingly macabre, this evening's heavy drugs layering fresh dimensions of Fright Night creepiness onto our adventure. Spirits whispered from the darkness, leapt in front of our faces, vanished into wisps of weed smoke. We wandered aimlessly, got lost, stumbled upon our favorite shrine. The grave of Patrick Murphy, who died on July 18th, 1876, beckoned. His monument was adorned with a statue of robed and rosaried Jesus, IHS and sunflower engraved cross to his side, arm above his head, finger raised to heaven, the vector of the deceased ascent in the afterlife. Fran saluted, then yelled boo to initiate three-way rock, paper, scissors. Ed, our friend, lost. Ed chugged a bottle of Mickey's malt liquor, tucked the empty into his army jacket, and began to climb the monument. He slipped at the pedestal base, fell back, and we caught him. 1, 2, 3, we pushed, enough for Ed to wrap his arms around Jesus' legs and shimmy up the stone until he got face to face with our Savior, hugging him for support. Kissy kiss, Fran taunted from below. Resolute, Ed reached into his jacket and removed the bottle. Leaning heavily on one foot and holding the statue steadfast with his other arm, he stretched far as he could and delicately balanced the green grenade-shaped glass upside down of the Mickey's bottle and opening end first onto the tip of Jesus' finger. Ghosts howled as Ed edged his way back down Jesus' stone body. We high-fived our bro victorious. The celebration was instantly cut short by raging paranoia. Until that moment, we skulked among the dead, minded our own disrespectful business. But having pranked the Son of God, we felt exposed and hallucinated sinistral silhouettes eyeing us suspiciously from the dimly lit windows of somber brownstones overlooking the graveyard's perimeter. "To the beach, my dudes," commanded Fran, cowardliness in direct proportion to his impulsiveness, sprinting back to the fence before Ed could brush himself off. Climbing, leaping over the sharp iron stakes, we ran after Fran into rushing traffic on Sheridan Road, the perversely skewed perspective making it impossible to judge our distance from speeding cars in every direction. Tripping deers and headlight trails, we froggered our way across the busy highway, dodging autos and miraculously staying alive. Honking horns dopplered into screaming high pitches that echoed across the sand as we ran with abandon onto the beach. We flung off our shoes and socks, the dunes undulating beneath our check. We flung off shoes and socks, the dunes undulating beneath our feet as we splashed into the freezing lake water. The jarring shock to my exposed flesh shot up my legs, titillating my dick and balls, shuddered throughout my chest cavity, and exploded inside my head. The electrifying clarity was breathtaking, a liberation felt by them, too, who threw off all their clothes and shamelessly ran buck naked into the frothing waves, diving beneath the moonlight water's surface. Time to choose, first willful act of the night for me. Join my compadres within the cold and wet, deep and dark, or stay dry on the beach, out of sight and out of mind. On cue with my uncertainty and indecision, time sped up, slowed down, sped back up. The shouts of Fran and Ed rising and falling in frequency and volume. Mickey Mouse whines to goofy guffaws. "Spitz!" Fran called out into the white noise of the waves crashing on the shore, the streaming traffic up the highway, the wind reverberating between the cityscape buildings. My elementary school classmates used to jeer at my name and spit at me until Olympian Mark Spitz won his record 7 gold medals, the quantum leap from hero to zero, from zero to hero, throwing me for a loop. Ever since then, I became a last name kind of guy, the single syllable abruptness and sharp tss at the end phonetically fitting my wiry frame and impulsive personality. Tonight's clarion call through the acid-enhanced filters summoned me into the frigid waters like a snake charmer's hypnotic melody when, without a second thought, I too got naked and dashed into the waters. The ice-cold lake was numbing, cleansing, and purifying. I sensed true buoyancy, a zero-G womb-like environment that dissolved the boundaries between mind, body, and world. Suspended within 1.3 quadrillion gallons of fresh water, its maternal quality surrounding, protecting, and calming me, I was a postmodern punk immersed within a frigid, prenatal reality. The euphoria lasted for a trimester of high school here, until a sharp object below tore into my foot. The searing pain shot up my leg, through my spine, and roared into my brain, birthing an out-of-body experience. I suddenly floated 100 feet above, saw myself swimming with Fran and Ed below, then flew to the beach where I was already sitting, watching myself fly back into my body. I re-entered my body and found myself fully clothed again except for my shoes and socks placed right next to me. Ed and Fran were still lolling in the lake, their shouts of joy indistinguishable from cries of terror. If they drowned, I would have to retrieve their bodies, perform last rites, and bury them. I dug my hands into the cool, damp sand, feeling every grain, so groovy. My punctured foot throbbed, heart pounded, blood circulated, a salty metallic flow reminding me of the big dark lake and my friends who might still be alive in there. Living or dead, they lurked below a mirrored surface stretching into an infinite hazy horizon, asymptotic with the dome of a cloud-shrouded sky. Time accelerated and clouds circulated in a frenzy. Years later, I would view Van Gogh's paintings in their 3D glory at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Studying them in books does their astonishingly layered topography no justice. Thick paint rising above the canvas in tortuous peaks and valleys, each masterpiece an entire universe unto itself. Was the savant on drugs? Where does madness end and art begin? Behind me, the cars racing along the northern tip of Lakeshore Drive, LSD, were fast as Speed Racer at Mach 5, leaving long, overlapping trails reminding me of the machine gun tracers from the movie we had just seen on the big screen, tripping our balls off, Apocalypse Now. The time dilation had an even more dramatic effect on the swirling clouds above, chaotically morphing into bizarre shapes embossed across the shimmering sky's vault. A fluffy cloud stopped, spiraled clockwise, transformed into the split face of an old bearded man who began talking to me. Hallucinogens, my friend, having already experienced some weird shit by the tender age here of about 16, this one nonetheless took the prize. The vision was so jarring that I had to recruit my third eye, the self, watching my hallucinating self hallucinate, just to get a grip and hang on. Was I actually seeing and hearing this? I was. Cloud Angel's voice was alien sounding yet hauntingly familiar, his words unintelligible yet emotionally soothing. I couldn't discern his accent or meaning. Was his timbre tenor or baritone? Was his language ancient or modern? I blanched again, double and triple checked this was really happening to me. It was. He kept talking. Dreams are bizarre enough, having them while awake, even stranger. Where do dreams come from? Which part of us is dreaming, which part experiencing that dream? What's the boundary between dreamer, dream, and dream observer? I grappled with a view of my conscious self, observing the observer of the awakened dreamer, dreaming dreams while awake. The LSD had annihilated once sacrosanct sensory, cognitive, and emotional divides. I appreciated the meridian lines surrounding me, the singularities between fright and flight, audience and art form, life and death, water and sky, lake and sand, dream and dreamer. The dangers here were becoming manifest, the reason many people lose their minds. I held on. The face kept speaking, faster now. Mouth moved, eyebrows furrowed, indecipherable words echoed across the sky. I felt profound mystery, egregious agony, and boundless ecstasy, not wanting the show to ever stop. until long shadowed appeared on all sides of me. I swung around. Streetlights along the highway cast swaying silhouettes of my seated body. When I gazed back up from that distraction, the clouds had dissipated and the ancient face had vanished, the scintillating sky silent except for the howling wind. Lonely, I yearned to join Fran and Ed again with the cold, dark, murky lake. Dying together, we'd eternally lurk below, haunt the shores, taunt future generations of tripping teen burnouts with our ghoulish prankster hijinks. Next thing I remember, we're back in Fran's MG Midget Roadster, damp but refreshed, smoking another joint and finishing the last of the Mickey's malt liquor. The intense hallucinations had tapered off, our minds lubricated with booze and tweaked with weed. But reality still hadn't recalibrated as we pulled up to a traffic light. We gawked at the signals, trying to figure them out. Is the light red, yellow, or green? Fran asks, squinting through the dirty windshield. They all look purple to me, Ed said, riding shotgun. Spitz, you're the misunderstood genius. What do you think? Folded like a 6-foot human accordion in the back crevice of that tiny roadster, I had to crook my neck to get a viewable angle. The bright purple light is at the bottom, guys. So I guess the color of the light must be green. Advance to go, screamed Fran, pedal to the metal, shifting into third, engine roaring, tires squealing. Collect $200. The burst of acceleration thrust me back against the folded convertible top, which I now noticed was open again, the momentum nearly hurling me out the back as I desperately clutched their headrests and assumed the fetal position to avoid being thrown out of the vehicle at 70 miles an hour. Fran's 8-track player blasted Black Sabbath, his musical tastes more conventional than Ed's nuanced post-punk picks. Hanging on for dear life, at that moment, I appreciated that band's head-nodding groove and Ozzy Osbourne's hypnotic vocals of Paranoid. All day long I think of things, but nothing seems to satisfy. Think I lose my mind if I don't find something to pacify. We pulled into the driveway of Ed's house and made a concerted effort to chill, knowing his parents were likely still up. Although we'd been acting like shameless fools in public for the past 5 or 6 hours, we now felt acutely accountable. I checked my watch, phosphorescent big arm at 2 and small at 10. Night still young, the parting to continue if we kept our cool. Ed's basement bedroom was our stoner HQ, down a flight of steps and opposite the laundry room. Bespoke and quirky, just like Ed, right of the door was a draftsman's desk covered in art supplies and illuminated by a standing jeweler's lamp. His unmade twin futon ran flush with the far wall, opposite which a vintage sound system and speakers stood like a shrine. We piled in, closed the door, and assumed our ground state. Ed at the stereo cranking Cure and Kim Crimson songs. Fran in the far corner smirking smugly, smoking parliaments, ashing into a potted weed plant. And your humble narrator sitting on a broken wicker chair, babbling nonstop about the glacial origins of Lake Michigan and the personas of Kabbalistic spirits. The talking head in the sky looked just like the archangel of the 10th Sephirot, Megatron, I explained. Half his face covered in blinding white light, the other half obscured by the infinite negative light of Yahweh, whose omnipresence and omniscience precludes mere mortals from ever comprehending him. All that information imploding in my mind like a black hole. Drink this, Fran insisted. It's called Shut the Fuck Up Juice. You'll love it. While yabbering, I hadn't noticed both guys had left the room, raided the refrigerator, and brought back a 12-pack of Beck's. We were at that late phase in acid trips when the brain, overwhelmed by sensory overload, is exhausted. Serotonin receptors still agonized, but nerves raw and crackling. Whatever happened at the beach that night happened to me and the entire universe. I felt then, as I do now, that the chemicals had short-circuited not only my neural networks, but the very fabric of space and time. That meant they were all interconnected, common components of the same emergent reality. The world had created me, and I was recreating the world. What had the cloud angel or demon told me? Akin to waking from a dream and forgetting the details, I sensed that if I could only remember, a deep truth would be revealed. I couldn't be sure what the colors were, but from their position, they communicated an action, perhaps a prescribed direction. Then I let it go, sensing a part of me knew the answers all along. Now, I relate this high school story, and this one is exact to memory. I went out of my way to precisely recount the details of this evening. I relate these details and connect them to my earlier rant about premonitions and being somehow connected to something else through each other and our experience of the world, because I think the two experiences, those of these premonitions and these sensations, and what I was experiencing that evening while on psychedelics, are also connected. Sometimes these connections that we experience with whatever it is behind the scenes, as it were, that connects us, happen by want of circumstance or who knows what other multivariate factors or variables. And other times we can induce them with chemicals. And as I hinted earlier on, you could argue in both directions that the determinism of chemicals triggering these experiences negate their otherworldliness because it merely confirms that the brain has chemistry and that inducing new or different chemicals short circuits that brain, if you will, creating these experiences which are similar to the experiences we would otherwise have in more random, non-chemical circumstances, thereby negating the air quote spirituality of both. It's all bullshit. But as even Michael Shermer has observed, sometimes you really have to shrug, no matter how reasonable, rational, deterministic you are, how scientific you perceive the world, how much you dismiss God, archangels, demons, this exciting, terrifying reality that lurks beneath the surface. Our experience of such things is as ancient as we are as a species. And as these forces feel, they are way more ancient than that. And that's kind of creepy and exciting. So, am I extolling fortune telling and tarot cards and mysticism and meditation and yoga leading to transcendent nirvana? Well, once again, we do not, as a culture or as individuals, need to leap from one extreme conclusion to the other. There's no reason that we can't investigate and consider both. We're polarized. We jump to conclusions. If our institutions wrong us in any way, then we set our institutions in their entirety on fire. And then if we rely on institutions to maintain a status quo, however antiquated, then we endlessly forgive our institutions and rely on them equally unreasonably to save us. Let's be a little bit more open-minded, people. Let's not throw science in the garbage and embrace every conspiracy theory, and at the same time not dismiss some of the holiest, most transcendent human experiences that we have experienced and shared since we've been human, and most likely even before, in the name of science. And lastly, what connects us to each other is, as James Joyce wrote, love. And if you love your fellow humans and you love yourself, then really you have no choice than to honor and feel blessed by your own experiences, many of which cannot and should not be explained simply through science and mathematics. Thank you for listening to Bald and Bloviating. I'm your host, Mookie Spitz, with lots more to come. Like, comment, share, and let's keep the conversation going.